13 unusual borders around the world. From the infamous demilitarized zone separating the nations of Korea to some unusual borders along and even within the United States, here's some of the craziest human-laid boundaries from around the world. But before we get to all that, we'd like to spread some love by shouting out one of our favorite comments. William Lane asked a question in response to our list of the world's most dangerous plants that we thought we'd answer. The marijuana, or cannabis plant, didn't quite crack the list, Mr. Lane, because we didn't consider its effects to be dangerous enough. Hey, thanks for the question, and we hope you and everyone else out there enjoys the video. Number 13. Korean DMZ. This strip of land is 160 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. It acts as a buffer zone between North Korea and South Korea, two nations that despite signing a ceasefire agreement are technically still at war with each other. Plenty of nasty incidents have happened on the DMZ, and the two nations are constantly throwing shade at each other. Little exemplifies the latter observation better than the flagpole war. In the 1980s, South Korea decided to erect a 323-foot-tall flagpole with a South Korean flag flying on top. Not to be outdone by their hated enemies to the south, the North Koreans responded by building this 525-foot-tall flagpole which flies their flag. Seems like a pretty petty way for nations to beef, but hey, it's better than killing each other, right? Number 12. Derby Line, Vermont. Life's much different on the northern side of the border than it is to the south. Things are a little more laid back in places like Derby Line, Vermont, and its sister city, Stansted, Quebec. As you can see, the border runs through the two towns, which are practically indistinguishable from each other. Luckily, the two cities, separated only by the nation that governs them and some white paint, have always gotten along famously, making a hop across the border literally nothing more than a stroll down the street. The Haskell Free Library lies on the border and provides service to both US and Canadian customers, while many people have two addresses, because their homes are in the same predicament. Unfortunately, it got a little less laid back since 9/11, but it beats the walls you'll see at some of these other borders that serve as physical blockades between nations and people, which, when you think about it, is never the ideal result. Number 11. Melilla and Ceuta. There's a refugee crisis going on in Europe that started in 2015. Millions of migrants fleeing from war-torn countries in Africa and Asia are crossing the Mediterranean. Many people are attempting to enter Europe illegally. If they are attempting to cross on land, the only spot to do so is the border into Spain from Morocco, either at Melilla or Ceuta. Tall fences like these line many sections of the border that reach nearly 20 feet high and are topped with barbed wire. Number 10. Barl-Nassau, Barl-Hertog. The border between Belgium and the Netherlands at Barl-Nassau is about as complicated as it gets. As you can see from this diagram, it looks more like a mall directory than the border of two countries. This is why in many places you may be having lunch outside somewhere, look down, and realize that you're right next to a different country. Pretty cool, but how did things end up so complicated, and why? Well, medieval treaties and land swaps between lords and dukes were clarified in borderline settlements as part of a treaty signed in 1843, and they still stick to those agreements. Number 9. Bur Tawil. One of the only places on Earth that is habitable but not claimed by a recognized government, Bur Tawil is the border between Egypt and Sudan. Another section of the border, called the Hala-Ib Triangle, is claimed by both countries. The story behind how this border came to be goes all the way back to the early 1900s, when Egypt asserted that the straight political boundary was the border between the nations, while Sudan went with the irregular administrative border. Though a few random people have tried claiming Bur Tawil, they haven't been taken seriously by the international community, and the inhospitable, though livable land, remains unclaimed. Number 8. Mount Everest. At 29,029 feet above sea level, Mount Everest is the world's tallest mountain. It's also a huge natural border separating two countries, Tibet and Nepal. When you hear about Everest Base Camp and climbers' journeys getting to the mountain, they're, due to political restrictions, likely on the Nepali side of Everest and not the Tibetan side, which is considered an autonomous region of China. Number 7. Cooch Behar District. This district, shared by India and Bangladesh, is reminiscent of the Barl-Hertog and Barl-Nassau enclaves. They both have tons of confusing areas where a section is owned by India, and then a section surrounding that section will be owned by Bangladesh. Maps usually represent the border with nothing more than a straight line, but if you find one detailed enough, you'll see that the border actually looks something like Swiss cheese with a bunch of tiny little holes representing borders. Number 6. Liberty Island. Located in New York, Liberty Island is home to the Statue of Liberty and is firmly surrounded by New Jersey. Liberty Island, you see, technically sits in New Jersey water, making the island a part of New Jersey. But a special agreement between the two states means that New York gets to claim the land, while New Jersey supplies electricity and collects taxes from the island. Number 5. Tumen River. North Korea's boundary between China is separated by two rivers, the deep, spanning Yalu River and the shallow, narrow Tumen River. It's easy to guess which one those fleeing from North Korea into China would prefer to use. We're as adventurous as anyone, but when you're fleeing an oppressive nation in pursuit of a viable future, we're taking the Tumen too. In some spots, it's so shallow, fleeing refugees can walk across, and it freezes in the winter, creating a natural walkway into, hopefully, a better tomorrow. Though the river can also be crossed into Russia, this rarely happens. The Russians keep a closer eye on their portion of the border, and unlike the friendly confines of China, there's very little Korean presence in Russia.
Number 4.
San Diego, Tijuana. This amazing image shows the stark contrast between the hustle and bustle of the cramped Mexican border city of Tijuana and a sparsely populated section of the United States, specifically Southern California. The President of the United States recently addressed this border and the walls he wants to build on it. Donald Trump held a rally that some would term inspiring, rather scary, in Huntsville, Alabama on September 22nd. He seemed to draw from the energy of the enthusiastic crowd during his long speech and began saying things that not only made a lot of people that weren't in attendance upset, but also uttered claims that became less and less lucid. We can't address all of it, but we do want to talk about what he said regarding the wall that he wants to build on the US-Mexico border. After clarifying that a wall would in fact be built, though it was never questioned, remember it was a rally, he went on to say that the wall would have to be see-through. He then shared that he thinks it would look better that way. Throughout this portion of the speech, he alternates between claiming that there's already a wall that they will renovate and then that they will build a wall. Two statements that seem to contradict each other. After going on in a somewhat incoherent fashion about people catapulting drugs over walls and explaining why he won't build walls on rivers or mountains, he ends by saying that the renovations should be done in 6 or 7 months and that he just wanted to let everyone know. I'm very confused, while also hoping I'll be able to make a trip up and down the border sometime soon to see what's going on for myself.
Number 3.
The not too distant future. The Diomede Islands, which are composed of Russia's Big Diomede and the US's Little Diomede, are right on the international date line. So even though the islands are just miles apart, they're in different time zones, meaning there's a 21-hour difference in time between the lands. Another strange quirk in this remote part of the world is that, while Big Island remains unpopulated, Little Island is home to a small population. This hasn't always been true. Big Island was once home to a Russian military base.
Number 2.
Wagga Border. This strip of land separating Pakistan and India is pretty normal as far as borders go, but it's the people that share the land that make it unique. Every day, 2 hours before sunset, Pakistan Rangers on one side and Indian border security on the other side conduct a sort of dance that ends with a simultaneous lowering of their respective countries' flags. The ceremony is very popular amongst locals and visitors alike. There's only one more border, and we won't keep you waiting on it for too long, but we'd like to quickly thank everyone out there for watching. Keep the comments and the interest coming, and we'll keep on churning out videos. Now, to an amazing place where 3 nations in South America collide.
Number 1.
Here's number 1, the Triple Frontier. You won't find a more perfect natural border than the region where Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay meet. The countries are separated by the convergence of 2 rivers, the Parana River and the Iguazu River. Each nation has a representative city near the conjunction. There's a lot more to the Triple Frontier than its convenient boundary. The largest hydroelectric dam in the world sits just miles away. For decades, the Triple Frontier has been notorious for being host to drug and weapons smuggling. The US government believed that Islamic terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda were gaining funds from these illegal, unsavory activities in the area, after intense scrutiny following 9/11. These accusations, however, have been disputed and criticized as being misguided or just plain wrong.